Hi everyone, my name is Jeff Chiba Stearns. I'm a filmmaker, animator, author, and illustrator from Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. I'm also Yonsei, fourth generation Japanese Canadian. I just want to say what a great pleasure it is to be part of this year's TADAIMA, a community virtual pilgrimage. When I was asked to be part of this, I jumped at the chance because it's really amazing to be able to unite the community through our storytelling, not just through an American perspective, but also now through a Canadian, international perspective on what it means to be Nikkei. So I founded my company, Meditating Bunny Studio Inc. back in 2001. It's a place where I get to create animation and documentary films, children's books, art prints, and soon to be graphic novels. My mother is Japanese Canadian. My father is mixed European descent. Therefore, I myself identify as mixed Japanese Canadian. Therefore, in a lot of the work that I do, I like to focus on multi-ethnic themes in my work and creating what I've sort of coined as Hapanimation. So it's sort of a style where I have blended Japanese anime and manga with sort of North American cartoon and comic styles. So it's sort of a drawing style I use to create my animation and my art. Now, hapa, if you don't know, is a Hawaiian word that means part or half. And it sort of found its way over to North America as a way to describe people who are self-identifying as being mixed. So they would call themselves hapas. Now, I kind of played on that and called it Hapanimation. This has been really important to me as I progressed, not only through just my art making, but also just through being able to create a community. By doing that, we created a festival up here in Canada called Hapa-palooza. And it was started in 2011 and it ran to about 2017. It was a festival where we celebrated sort of multi-ethnic identity. And it was pretty much Canada's only and largest festival that celebrated mixed roots, arts, and culture. We're still operating. It runs sort of a few events every year where we sort of discuss a mixed race identity, but also celebrate it through music, art, literature, poetry, anything you can think of that's sort of artistic based. This is sort of the platform that we use. So you can actually learn a little bit more of the festival here. I'm going to show a trailer and then I'm going to talk about my film work. If you have multiple ancestries, it can be a very rich experience for you, but it can also be something that could be kind of challenging.
What are you? Where are you from? People are not asking me, did I grow up in Toronto? Or, they're asking me to fit into a particular box.
Really? You're German? No, you're not German. Who's the adopted kid?
It means that I have the experience of being something of an outsider. I think that's really informed how I look at things creatively.
Hapa-palooza is a festival that celebrates multi-ethnic identity, culture, and arts, and is celebrated in Vancouver, British Columbia.
A place where individuals and families can find all of their stories honored and accepted and celebrated. So many people come to us and speak of feeling like fractions of themselves.
We're not fractioned, we're actually whole people.
Hapa-palooza is about celebrating the entirety of one's heritage and one's experience.
Where people can have discussions around topics of multi-ethnicity and multiraciality.
We can begin to appreciate the very complex and varied commonalities across difference.
Every year we try to have a mixture of events that celebrate multiple ancestries coming together and blending and mixing.
Mixed flicks. We've had so many people presenting their films on mixed heritage.
Mixed Voices Raised, which is a storytelling night. Spoken word artists, poets, musicians. People are speaking from the heart and speaking from their experience. Hip Hop Hooray. It's an awards night. Over the years, we've had the honor of recognizing and celebrating exemplary people.
Family Day is the final event, the big brouhaha. Really good world music. Face painters, balloon artists.
It's a day that we all wish that we had had when we were children.
It can really help inspire kids to think a little bit more critically about their own identities.
An idea of a festival of bringing people together who celebrate their mixed heritage, to have conversations about how we are all different, and yet we can celebrate that difference. It's extraordinary.
It's a story of people and all our different views, all our different ways of being in this world.
We need something that celebrates the other, people who might not identify as either this or that, but actually identify as many different things.
That people feel beautiful and celebrated and seen for the entirety of who they are.
So in 2005, I created my first Hapanimated film. It was called What Are You Anyways? And this was basically, I think we figured out this is the first animation that ever explored mixed race identity through animation. And it's a story very autobiographical of myself growing up in Kelowna, British Columbia, a sort of a small Canadian city, being mixed Japanese, and sort of some of those crazy, interesting experiences that I had dealing with the what are you question. Because as someone who is mixed, I dealt with that a lot growing up, being sort of in between my Japanese and my European sides of the family. And this film did really quite well on the film festival circuit, and you can now watch it on YouTube. So I encourage everyone, even if you're just mixed, to watch the film and learn a little bit more about sort of my experiences from a 20-year-old perspective. This film was made in 2005, so quite a while ago. When we think back, how I saw the world when I was that age, this is a good reflection of how someone sort of saw their, I guess, hapa-ness during that time. I kind of followed that up as a bit of a departure from the Hapanimation. I did a film, though, on Post-it notes called Yellow Sticky Notes. This film was probably one of my most successful films to date. It was an animated film basically created on only using Post-it notes by drawing on 4,000 Post-it notes. And it was a self-reflection of about 11 years of my life, trying to sort of figure out, what I was doing artistically and through my career as a filmmaker. And it actually became very successful. It was a sort of self-reflection on not just my life and these to-do lists that were overrunning my life, but also on world events that I felt like I was ignoring because I was so busy trying to figure things out. This film you can watch on YouTube as well. It's only about 6 minutes long, but went viral. I think it hit about 2 million views. I got sort of wanting to create films that were a little bit longer because animation takes a very long time, almost a year to create these short animated films. So I wanted to create a longer form piece, but I knew that I still wanted to incorporate animation. What was the best way to do that? Was to create documentary and animation. So I made this film, One Big Hapa Family, in 2010. This is actually going to be its 10th year anniversary this year. And to celebrate, we've been kind of hosting screenings across Canada. Obviously, with the pandemic, we've had to slow that down a bit, so we'll be doing a lot more virtual screenings. You can actually screen One Big Hapa Family on the TADAIMA website under films, and it'll be up there and running for free. You can stream it through the course of the rest of the TADAIMA community virtual pilgrimage. So this film looked at basically why all of my Japanese Canadian family intermarried after my grandparents' generation, and how 4 generations of my Japanese Canadian family sort of self-identify as being Japanese Canadian, considering that a lot of my cousins and second cousins are all mixed Japanese now. And basically I sort of traveled around and talked to my family about identity. And it was probably one of the first times they'd ever done that. So this film kind of became the quintessential film on intergenerational Japanese Canadian identity, told through 4 generations of my Japanese Canadian family. And also incorporated a lot of animation into the film as well, and did really well. And to this day, it still gets screened on television, and people still sort of seek it out as a great watch. So really encourage you to check it out.
Maybe we could say it was because of the war, and we had to break our ties with Japan, and so we really went overboard doing it.
We are totally different, really, because you're different as much to me as I am different to you.
And that's something that I felt from many years ago, that this was a way, like, we were going to marry a Caucasian.
They call me Sushi.
Once they called me Sushi too.
There might be a day that comes and when people say, yeah, what do you mean I'm Canadian? I don't know what else I am.
So yeah, there's quite the mixture. So there's white, there's black, there's native, and then of course Japanese.
Little Indian Sioux or Crow, little Frosty Eskimo, little Turk or Japanese, or don't you wish that you were me? Or don't you wish that you were me? And that was something that we took at school in the early grades. And it was supposed to be written by an English boy.
I often hear people make the comment, well, our community is getting smaller, it's dying, and the problem is intermarriage. We're just disappearing. And I turn around and say no, because intermarriage actually makes us one of the fastest growing communities in this country, because we're doubling the number of people who can potentially add children to our community.
The next kind of larger film I did, second feature-length documentary I did, was one called Mixed Match. And this is a really important film for me because I was approached by Athena Asclepiadis, who I think is also presenting as part of TADAIMA. And she's going to be talking about why it's important for mixed race people to join national bone marrow registries, because there's a great need to help diversify these registries for patients who are suffering from diseases like leukemia or aplastic anemia. And they need bone marrow donors and transplants. So Mixed Match became a film that basically looked at the need to have to diversify these registries with mixed or multiracial people, or just people who identify as sort of multi-ethnic as well, or of a sort of minority group. And so this film took about 6 years to make, and it released in 2016. And we toured it extensively across North America, universities, film festivals. And at each festival, we had bone marrow drives where we signed people up to the National Bone Marrow Registries. And I think we signed up thousands of people. And we were told that some people who signed up were actually called to be donors. So I always said if we could save one life with this film, the entire 6-year journey was worth it. And I think for sure that this film became, something that was very important for us. You can watch Mixed Match as well through the TADAIMA website if you go under films, and you can stream that for free for the length and duration of the online festival. So I really encourage you to check that film out too.
I was diagnosed with aplastic anemia when I was 11 years old in 1993. They also said your best shot at a long-term survival is through a bone marrow transplant. And that's when ethnicity came into play. That's when I was told, because you're half Chinese and you're half Caucasian and your kind of ethnic mix is so rare that the chances of you finding a match are 1 in a million.
No doubt, my mixed race heritage is the reason why it's so hard to find a match. It's not that, it's just, if you're Asian, it's harder to get a match. No, it's just that there are less Asians on the registry. Then you take mixed race people, and there's like no one on the registry.
My mission is still the same from day one. It's been the same message, which is I want to help people. I want to save them. I want to bring joy to families and help bring cures to families by registering people. I did write a letter to her.
Oh, good.
To my recipient. I'm very blessed to be able to participate in the opportunity to hopefully, help your life. And I love you, even though I don't know you. And I really, really hope that this transplant is successful, but know that even if it isn't, that I am so happy to do it for you. And I'm excited to do it for you. And I will never regret it. I just pray that I can be a blessing to you and to your family and to change your life, because you have already changed mine and I haven't even met you yet.
It's bittersweet because I think about some of the patients that don't end up having a good ending, and I think about the feelings attached to that. And for these families, it's very real, and it's like every day that they're battling this, and it's even worse when you know there's a cure out there but you just can't grasp it. It's like it's elusive for like many people.
I kind of moved on from film recently. During the end of Mixed Match filming it, I had children. I had a daughter, and we actually filmed the end of Mixed Match. We filmed the birth of my daughter because we donated her cord blood to the National Cord Blood Bank here in Canada, and that was a big shift for me. And as I was reading more kids' books to my daughter, I realized I really wanted to make children's books. And so I wanted to make a children's book for her. And because she was young, I wanted her to understand her mixedness through animals. And so I created a children's book called Mixed Critters. And basically, Mixed Critters was a children's book that I created so that she could see that animals didn't have to be either this or that. They could be many things mixed just like she was. And this was kind of a fun book to do. It was an ABC book where I actually blended a bunch of animals together so that you could read this sort of in an ABC way. And kind of fun, things like ligers. I think they actually exist. And some mythical creatures, obviously, like the otterfly. But it was just kind of a fun way for her to sort of see a bunch of mixed up creatures. And, we could have kind of a talk about identity as well. So that was Mixed Critters. And it was kind of caught the bug for making children's books. This year, I just released my second children's book, Nori and His Delicious Dreams, about a mixed Japanese boy who likes to dream of sleeping in food. But before I go into this book, I'm going to be doing a reading of it. I'm going to talk about my latest graphic novel, On Being Yukiko. So I always wanted to do a graphic novel. And this is something that I've been working on for the last 6 months now with the Japanese-Canadian artist, Lillian Michiko Blakey. And she approached me with this idea to sort of adapt her family's story of her grandmother who came to Canada at the turn of the century as a pitcher bride. And they sort of went through a lot of hardships, basically trying to make their way living in Canada. And it was sort of like one thing after another. Obviously, they were affected greatly by the sort of World War II and the internment of the Japanese Canadians. They were sent to a sugar beet farm in Alberta. Afterwards, they went back to Japan because there was nothing left for them here in Canada after World War II. So it's actually a story told through Lillian telling a story to her granddaughter. And in the book, it's sort of a blending of my style. That's a Hapanimation style I was talking about, with this blend of anime and manga with North American cartoon styles, but also with Lillian's artwork as well. And what's cool about that is again, it's an intergenerational story about a girl named Emma who doesn't really quite kind of see herself as being Japanese Canadian because she is only quote unquote a quarter Japanese. She's a 12-year-old girl. But through the story of her grandmother, telling her story of Maki, her great-great-grandmother, basically she finds a sense of pride for the fact that she is Japanese Canadian. And she actually has a Japanese Canadian name, Yukiko. And because of that, through the sort of story, she starts to gravitate towards sort of learning more about her Japanese Canadian roots and her culture. So something that's very important to us, and I think it's something that we can help bridge that gap between the generations of Japanese Canadians, because, as much as in Canada, we almost have a 95 to 100% intermarriage rate within the community, that I'm sure in the US, similar, it's on the rise, that it's good that we can help have these sort of talks about identity with each other, especially through the various generations of Japanese Canadians and how we self-identify, especially for those who aren't self-identifying as being full Japanese, American, or Canadian anymore. So that for us is a very important story. You can pre-order copies of On Being Yukiko on our website, meditatingbunny.com. I'll talk a bit more about that after the presentation, but you can go there and do pre-orders, and that's going to help us, since we're independently publishing the book, basically help afford the cost of printing it and distributing the book out into the world. So the next book I'm going to read to you is a book called Nori and His Delicious Dreams. This book is very important to me in the sense that it helps us sort of feature the idea of representation of a character who is basically mixed Japanese like me. And but I also wanted to create a book where I could inspire children to want to try different foods from around the world and basically different cultures. So it might help sort of inspire them to, want to seek out and try different foods and encourage them to do that. So I'm going to read to you Nori and His Delicious Dreams, and enjoy. When people buy books, you can order books off my website too, meditatingbunny.com. I always draw a little sketch in there for people, which I think is fun. So I always love when I had a book as a kid and you always had the author draw something or write something, a little note for you. Great. So I'm going to read to you Nori and His Delicious Dreams. There once was a boy named Nori who had a very unusual story. He would snuggle up tight every night in his bed, dreaming of tastier places to lay down his head. Nori dreamt he was wrapped in a spicy burrito and rolled up in sushi sprinkled with flakes of bonito. He would dream of being nestled inside a soft banh mi and swirled onto a plate of meatballs and spaghetti. Nori dreamt he was comfy on hummus and falafels and sprawled out on top of fried chicken and waffles. He would dream he was snug in poutine smothered with gravy and tossed in a kale salad that was both sweet and savory. Nori dreamt he was cozy on fried green tomatoes and stretched out on a scoop of warm mashed potatoes. He would dream he was folded in a saucy donair and tucked inside the sweet cream of a chocolate eclair. Nori dreamt he was relaxing in a casserole dish and squeezed like a lemon on top of crisp, battered fish. He would dream of a butter pillow on a stack of pancakes and woven inside a huckleberry pie just like Grandma bakes. Nori dreamt he was stuffed inside steamy shumai and mixed with shrimp and tofu in a tangy pad thai. He would dream of a non-blanket next to tandoori wings and lounging on a tower of golden onion rings. Nori dreamt he was floating in a salty sea of ramen, so now you can see that his dreams are not all that common. And every morning, after deliciously dreaming all night, Nori's parents wondered where he got such a huge appetite. The end. So as you can see, at the end of the book, I actually included a list of the foods that Nori likes to sleep in, just in case you don't know what some of them are. But also a lot of kids like to go through this and check off the foods that they want to try or the foods that they have tried. And I think it's a great way to sort of encourage them to want to seek out some new foods. And at the very back, because I love drawing on Post-it notes, I drew Nori on a bunch of Post-it notes. He likes to use his imagination. He also likes to be active and do some fun activities with his cat, Mochi. He also has his mother is Japanese Canadian and his father is European Canadian descent. And I thought that was something important to include in the story. It doesn't become a huge part of the story, but I think it's just nice to be there, that we can see ourselves reflected and represented in books like this. He has an Obachan, who he calls Bachan, and that's his Japanese Canadian grandmother. And I think it's just kind of fun to create stories like this that can feature kind of characters who have diverse backgrounds. So that's Nori and His Delicious Dreams. You can get this book on my website at meditatingbunny.com. If you visit the store, you can get that, Mixed Critters. You can also pre-order On Being Yukiko. But I'll talk a bit more about that at the end of the presentation. Right now, I want to show you how I've created my Hapanimation style. So as you can see, the similar style that I've used in Nori, it's kind of a blend and a mix, just like myself, of North American cartoon and comic styles with sort of Japanese anime and manga styles. It was something where I really kind of sort of was inspired by all those things growing up and watching all those types of cartoons that as I sort of developed a drawing style, it just sort of evolved into something that was kind of mixed and blended. And also I enjoyed it because it became kind of a part of my own identity, being someone who identified as being mixed, that my style was kind of mixed as well. So I kind of jokingly called it Hapanimation as a way to sort of describe that mixed and blended style. So I'm going to show you how it's done. All right, here we go. Okay, I'm going to show you my Hapanimation style and how I create it. And again, Hapanimation for me, and my style is really a blend of Japanese North American cartoons with kind of an anime and manga style. So I've kind of borrowed sort of elements of both that I've kind of blended together. And I like it because for me, it's very similar to how I identify as being someone who is mixed. So to kind of start off, I like to talk about appeal too, because I want to create characters that are appealing. And to kind of demonstrate what appeal is, I usually draw the most appealing character of all, one that I can draw with 3 circles, and you can tell me right off the bat who that is. If you said Mickey Mouse, you are right. So all I did was draw 3 circles in the span of 2 seconds, and boom, you've got a character that you can recognize. So when I'm creating a character like Nori, I kind of want him to also have very similar kind of sensibility in terms of appeal. So I'll start with kind of that circle as well too, but I use these crosshairs to kind of show, is Nori looking up? Is he looking down? Well, here he's maybe looking a bit more up. And I use these crosshairs and kind of curve it over this sort of sphere just to get a sense, this rough drawing of kind of, where he's looking, what direction he's looking. Now you can add ears if you want, but because he wears a hoodie, you can't actually see that he has ears. But, just for fun, let's put some ears in there. There we go. So let's kind of rough the character in like this. Maybe he's waving. There we go. And again, see how quickly I'm drawing? Again, just using kind of simple shapes and trying to be kind of 3D. When I'm drawing, I'm trying to create these 3D drawings. Now, again, he has big hands, only 4 fingers. I don't know why, but cartoon characters, usually in North America, only have 4 fingers. I think it's just sort of a way to make animation quicker, only having to draw 4 fingers. So this is kind of a rough outline of how I'm going to sketch out Nori. And if you're at home, you can use pieces of paper and you can actually put one on top of each other and just draw over top of your rough outline. So because I'm using a digital drawing, I can actually just decrease the opacity a bit. So now I can draw kind of a clean version. And in anime, they have nice sort of S lines that they use. So as you can see here, a nice S right there, nice curves. Those make for nice appealing drawings. Now, again, in sort of North American style, we use sort of these button eyes. And in sort of an anime sense, you would use kind of bigger eyes like this. So sort of to draw sort of a character, right? But again, because this is sort of a Hapanimation style, I like the use of little button eyes. I think it's cute. And he has a nice little nose there, little bump for a nose. And he's always got this really big smile because he's always hungry. And he's always thinking about food, and he's always looking out for food. There we go. So he's always happy. I would be happy too if I was always eating delicious food. All right, there's some eyebrows. Now, because Nori has a hoodie, I always have his hair kind of sticking out of his hood just like this. So you never really see much more of his hair than this little tuft that sticks out like that. Now, Nori has little ears that kind of flop like this because he's got an old pair of pajamas. There we go. Here's his hoodie. And it kind of just bunches up like this. There we go, over top of his arm. And like this. And there we go. And because he's waving, let's draw that as arm in. Little crease right there. There we go. And bump, bump, bump. There we go. And I'll draw little marks to show that he is waving. You can see that. Oh, and he's got his buttons for his pajamas there. There we go. And cool. So again, you can kind of add in some shadows, and I usually do that just by giving a little bit of a crosshatch. And so that's just adding some lines on the face. And this is kind of a very manga sort of style, using this sort of cross-hatching, especially the old black and white manga comics, which I think is kind of a fun way to sort of, and also a very illustrative style as well. Not too much, because you don't want to sort of muddy up your drawing, but just enough to kind of add some definition, make it look more 3D. So I'll show you as soon as I take that layer off. So this is kind of the, drawing that I've done based on that kind of rough drawing. And as you can see, kind of combines both, a little bit of a manga sensibility with a little bit of a North American cartoon style. And that is what I call Hapanimation. There we go. And this is the style that I've also utilized in my graphic novel, On Being Yukiko. And hope you'll be able to check that out. That should be coming out the fall of 2020, this year, if all goes well, later in the fall. And you can visit my web store and pick up copies of Nori and His Delicious Dreams, Mixed Match, as well as pre-order copies of On Being Yukiko. That'll help us afford the cost of printing the book, which will be coming out because we're independently publishing that book through my company. Here we go. And that is creating that Hapanimation style and drawing a picture of Nori. All right. Well, there you go. That was my Hapanimation style. I hope it encourages you to go out and want to try drawing some illustrations of your own, or even just be creative. It doesn't have to be drawing. It could be writing. It could be storytelling. Anything that really sort of inspires you to go out and be creative. If you enjoyed my work, please continue to follow what I'm doing on my Instagram at meditatingbunny. And you can also visit my website, www.meditatingbunny.com, where you can watch some of my films. You can order DVDs of my films as well as children's books. And you can actually pre-order copies of On Being Yukiko because we're self-publishing, we're independently publishing the graphic novel. We need to help raise funds to afford the cost of the printing. So any kind of funds we receive now will help towards the printing costs of the book that we're hoping to have finished by the end of the summer, and hopefully will be released by late fall 2020. So coming out very soon, in just a few months. So yeah, please help there if you'd like. I want to thank TADAIMA for having me be part of this year's virtual pilgrimage. It's very unfortunate that we can't all be in person, but at least we can be together globally, internationally, through initiatives like this and share our stories from an international perspective. So I want to thank you for tuning in and listening to me talk about my work, but I also want to take questions from you. So please have some questions ready. We're going to do a Q&A, and I will look forward to answering all of your questions. So thanks again, and here we go.
Hi, Jeff.
Hello, how are you?
That was awesome. I'm so impressed by how quickly you drew that Nori, which I know you have a lot of practice at doing, but still.
Yes, I always have to draw 50,000 drawings to finally draw a good one, and I think I've got that out of my system. Being an animator, some of the animations I've done, I think I've had upwards of 10,000 drawings, right? So you definitely have to be able to draw quick if you're doing animation.
Wow. And how long did it take you? I know you said doing a short animation takes up to a year. How long did it take you to do the whole Nori book?
Nori was sort of done over the span, I'd say probably a good, I guess, half a year. It was something I just kind of wanted to do. And the great thing about that is that I can kind of juggle it with other projects. So I can be in the middle of promoting one or doing some commercial work. And just kind of sneak out every few hours and do a couple drawings or something. And so it's good to kind of just sort of intermingle that. But there's a lot of work that goes into creating any book, obviously. And it definitely takes longer than I think a lot of people think.
And this is going to give away that I am not an artist, or I cannot draw at all. But were you looking at food when you drew those pictures? Was that from memory? Was it from like how you wish food looked? How did that work?
It was actually taken from pictures I took of food. There was, I guess, on Instagram when it first came out, everyone would take pictures of food. If you remember that, they probably still do. But luckily, I've been very fortunate. I've been able to travel around the world, especially with the work I've done. And I'm always kind of capturing pictures of food because to me, food is about, where you are in that sense of place. And I think for me, my whole family, my wife and I and our kids, we just love to eat. So the book made sense. Definitely made sense.
Yeah, that's great. And it's so, I was looking at that and getting hungry. I was looking at those photos.
Yeah, don't make the book before lunch.
Right.
Or grocery shop.
Right. No, that's dangerous. Jeff, I'm wondering how you started drawing or what brought you to, eventually create this style that is so unique and so, specific to you.
Right.
But where'd you get your start?
You know what? I guess, early on as a kid, I just always drew. And that's something I just loved to do. As I got kind of older, especially in high school, I took almost every single art class that was possible in order to, just excel the craft. I didn't really even know that was going to be a career option for me until I kind of got into animation school and realized, okay, cool, I can do this for a living. And I soon kind of realized I wanted to use that medium to create my own work, especially through film, through the kids' books, etc. But in high school, I kind of fell in love a lot with Japanese animation, anime and manga. And it was pretty rare to get that stuff back in the 80s and 90s. You had to order it from Japan, and it would cost a fortune on these VHS tapes used to get. But a lot of that love kind of seeped into my style early on. But also just watching a lot of cartoons as a kid here in North America. And so, like I said, that almost subconsciously that style developed, I think, over time. Because, as a teenager, I was always drawing anime and manga. And then, as I kind of developed my own style, it kind of became a bit of a hybrid. And it kind of made sense, because of my own sort of mixed background. And, like I said, now it comes natural. Anything I draw is kind of in that style. So.
Yeah, that's so awesome. And we do have a question from David. Hi, David, watching along, who says, where did you go to school to learn your art? You mentioned you went to animation school.
It was, there's an arts university here in Vancouver called Emily Carr, University of Art and Design. It's one of the top art schools, I think, in the country. And so I was really fortunate to be able to get into that school. The competition at the time was pretty tough, especially the animation program. I think they only took 15 students at the time per year. And that to me made all the difference, because at Emily Carr, they taught you how to be a filmmaker and a creative more so than an industry animator. And so coming out of that program, I knew how to make films. And I think that for me made all the difference, because it allowed me to be, to set my path to create passion projects, especially the ones that I showed right now.
Yeah. And I want to ask you a little bit. I know you talk a lot about your identity as mixed race Japanese Canadian. And I'm wondering how in the early days, as you were sort of beginning a lot of this storytelling, how that identity shaped your approach to your work and your approach to the stories that you wanted to tell and how you wanted to tell them.
Yeah, I think as I was going through university, I was becoming more self-aware, I think, of my own mixedness. And especially sort of my Japanese roots. I spent a lot of time in the city I grew up, Kelowna, with my grandparents, my Japanese Canadian grandparents. And, sort of developing kind of a love of that side of the family and exploring that. But always kind of feeling like, I was sort of in between. And it was really the What Are You Anyways animated film I did in 2005 when I really got to explore that through all those little snippets and experiences I had through life. And, I think that kind of awakened something in me. It's hard for me to watch that film now, because that was me at the age of 20 or whatever it was. I'm 40 now. So, you can imagine that over that time, I've definitely spent a lot more time, working in this area. But, for me, that's a perspective that maybe a 20-year-old would have, trying to explore their identity at that time period in their life. And I've realized that when I made that film, I got a lot of comments from people from all over the world who saw it, were just like, that's my life story. Like, you've captured that. It really inspired me to want to try and tell my own stories. And I was getting some pretty powerful kind of messages from people, and realizing that, there weren't a lot of people exploring multiracial identity within sort of the medium of film. And especially meeting other filmmakers and artists like Kit Fulbeck and stuff, and realizing, okay, there is sort of a thirst for this. And I felt it was really important that I continued to explore that as I continued on with the art making and the filmmaking. So,
yeah. Wow. And I mean, kind of related, you mentioned in your presentation earlier that One Big Hapa Family came out 10 years ago. So looking back, a decade later, would you do that film differently? Do you think the story has changed? Obviously not, your family story is what it was at that point, but 10 years later, do you think there are sort of different ideas, different conversations happening around mixed raceness, multiraciality?
Yeah, definitely. I think that was really important for us, is that we celebrated that 10th year anniversary of One Big Hapa Family, because I wanted to see if things had shifted. Are things changing within the community? Are things expanding? Are they evolving? And what I'm realizing is that, there's definitely a lot more dialogue and discussion. There's a lot more mixed kids now. Obviously, I'm having now what we call Hapa 2.0, or my kids are now mixed of a mix. My wife is Japanese Canadian as well, mixed Japanese. So our children are actually, if you think about it, the exact same mix as my wife and I. And that's an exciting time, I think, in our family's history, that we're now having mixes of a mix, right? Yeah. But now it's also, I can talk to my kids about their own mixed identity as well, because I myself identify as mixed. Whereas the previous generation, the Yonsei generation, and prior to that, most are, quote unquote, pure Japanese, Canadian, or American. And so they might have not had the same experience that I might have had. And also growing up in the 80s is a lot different now than growing up, in the 2000s.
Right.
So, I think that 10-year anniversary was really great to celebrate, now that we're in 2020, to get a sense of, how are the kids self-identifying? How are they seeing themselves as being Japanese Canadian? What point do they really sort of embrace that identity? And so that's partly what also kind of led to that graphic novel, and wanting to explore it in that fashion as well too, because I realized that kids of that particular age group, they love that format, right? So film, animation, kids books, anything that's kind of will relate to whatever the reader is at that point in their life, I think is important to help inspire them to want to, I guess, just dig a little deeper, to think about their own sense of identity. And that's really what One Big Hapa Family was set out to do. And I think I still get, parents of mixed kids are like, thank you for making this film, because, now it was a starting point where I could talk to my kids about it. And that was some of the best comments I ever received, were emails from parents who were like, you know what, we watched your film, we came to one of your screenings. My teenage kids were in the car with me, and we had the most amazing talk in the car afterwards that I've never would have thought we would ever have had. And, it was really eye-opening for me, and it was really important for them. And that to me is why I make what I make, is sort of create that dialogue and discussion and excite people to want to talk about identity, especially amongst a family circle, right? So, So One Big Hapa Family 10-year anniversary is really just an excuse to try and get more of that dialogue going.
Yeah. And I think making these stories specifically for kids or specifically for families to talk about is so important and meaningful. And I told you this, but I ordered a copy of Mixed Critters for my sister who's expecting a baby. And it's so fun to be able to think about having those conversations with a next generation that, we've had between ourselves as like grown-up siblings. But yeah, that's awesome. So thank you for making those. And we have some questions from the audience that I will bring up now too. So Kara asks, do you prefer drawing out new ideas on paper or online? And what software do you use to do your drawings and animations?
I'm a huge proponent of this, your hands. Most of the animation that I've ever done is what we call classical animation or traditional, which means that really it's a matter of picking up pen and paper and drawing directly on paper. I love being able to, I use this Pentel ink brush. I think I've got one right here. These are amazing. No sponsorship there, but basically it's an ink brush, and I use this to do everything really by hand. And that for me, I just love that tactility of pen on paper. Now, recently I have kind of moved a little bit more to digital drawing. I use a Cintiq, like a Wacom Cintiq, just draw on, and that just kind of speeds my process up. So, even for the graphic novel, I was hoping to do everything by hand, but because it was a mashup between Lillian and my sort of work, hers was already kind of digitized. So it kind of made sense to lay things out and then draw in Photoshop. So I use Photoshop to draw in. I'm kind of experimenting now with the new program. I can't remember. It's Clip Studio Pro. So I might start playing around with that. But, if I am doing stuff digitally, it usually is using sort of a tablet or a Cintiq to draw within. But whenever I can, whenever I get the chance, it's always try to draw on paper as much as possible.
All right, Kara, we'll check back in and see if you do any drawing in the future.
Sure, drawing. I love seeing drawings.
And another question from David. Were you influenced by the work of Maurice Sendak?
Yes. I keep a copy of this. Is the first. This is a first edition of Where the Wild Things Are,
that's awesome.
Which for me, he's someone that really inspired me as a kid. The sketchiness of it, the cross hatching, everything about kind of what he did really kind of inspired me. Like In the Night Kitchen, all those books, to the point where you can see it. It obviously has inspired, the character design, the styles. And to me, I think it's great. Like I think to have that sort of inspiration is really important for any artist, and to expand on that with your own sort of styles as well. But I think we always have to pay homage to Dr. Seuss, all those ones that, I grew up reading, and inspired me to want to get into doing kids books, and I think, that's great, that you can seek out other artists to inspire you. And definitely Maurice is somebody that definitely, I've collected a lot of his books over the years. That's for sure.
That's awesome. Thanks, David, for that question. And another one from Sean B, who wants to get some of your books for his kid relatives. Do you draw your family and or capture them on film sometimes?
Yeah. I think, obviously with Mixed Match, we filmed my daughter's birth, you know what I mean? So my wife obviously was very brave to let me, to say, hey, honey, we want to use this for the end of Mixed Match. You can watch Mixed Match actually on the TADAIMA website. I do encourage you to do that. But you'll see, my daughter and my wife are at the end of that. You know what? My daughter is a huge inspiration to me because, we're drawing together now. We're drawing a lot together. And she's developed her own style, which is really fun to watch. And so she'll come up here and she'll want to draw on my computer all the time too. And I think that's what's really fun is that it's not so much, me inspiring her. It's the idea that we can inspire each other, right? And, we'll draw together and we'll try to sort of create work together. And to the point where, sometimes, I will draw my kids because it's always fun to draw your kids. But I think at the same time, it's fun to watch her draw me, right? Or her draw the family. And even just watch, because kids have that imagination that they haven't lost yet, right? I think it is as you get older, your imagination starts to fade, and to sort of see that spark again has really inspired me. I think, and that's why I sort of took that foray into doing graphic novels and children's books, because I think, geez, when I was even a teenager, I wanted to do kids books, and it just happened. I went into film. And film is so time consuming that even like a film like Mixed Match took 6 years to make, right?
Yeah.
Or some of the animation I've done has taken a year to make. Or now it's sort of like is my chance to kind of get into doing sort of more books and stuff. I still have documentaries up my sleeve. I still have some animations up my sleeve, but it's kind of like one project at a time. And taking the time to really perfect whatever you're working on.
That actually leads perfectly to my next question, which was, are there stories that you are really looking forward to telling in the future, stories you have kind of in the back of your head or up your sleeve that you're looking forward to?
Yeah, definitely. I always have a big folder of ideas. It's sort of projects in development at various stages of development. And it's important, I think, I've probably got like 100 different projects that I want to do. But it's sort of like what kind of lands, right? And the project that's On Being Yukiko really sort of hit at the right time. It was going to be an animation, but I kind of switched focus to do a graphic novel, more so because I just had never done one. And I grew up reading tons of comic books and manga, and I just wanted to do a graphic novel and realizing, oh yeah, this kind of makes sense. And the fact that we can have this sort of like collaboration between Lillian and I, Lillian, comes from a perspective that, this is her family story, whereas I could tell the next generation the story, right? And so we can kind of use those characters interchangeably back and forth. That was fun. That was a really fun process, and when I illustrated this book, and I've got a, this is it right here. This is the pre-copy before.
So cool.
But you know what? I just finished it. We just finished the book, all these lovely, amazing pages. But essentially, it was fun. The way I did it was chronologically. We kind of just, Lillian had a base story down, and I just did one page at a time from page 1 all the way up to page, 53, I think is what we ended on.
Wow.
And it was basically page 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way up to 53. And it was done in that order.
Wow.
Which is not something I recommend anyone doing because you can make a lot of mistakes. But even the way I animate is that I do what's a straight ahead format. I don't do what's called the betweening, where I draw one drawing and the next drawing and then I draw what's in between. I have to draw here and end here. So it always has to be a sense of order for me. And maybe that's just the way my brain works. I have no idea. But to me, that motivates me to kind of keep going. And there's days where I could do, 2 or 3 pages of On Being Yukiko a day. And so really over the course of maybe 3 months, I was able to get all those pages compiled, especially having half the artwork already done with Lillian's work was really helpful and sped the process up. So with good news is that we're on track, that we probably will have the book printed probably probably by the fall. So, you know, people are pre-ordering the book. Expect that to be hopefully an early Christmas present if we can get everything into the printers in time. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Congratulations on that's incredible.
Thanks.
And did you collaboratively write the text, or were you writing the text sort of off of Lillian's base story and using both artwork from you and from Lillian?
Yeah, she sort of sent me this little base script. And then I would kind of go through it, and I really kind of more adjusted like the talk between the grandma and the daughter. So the stuff where it's sort of like my artwork. So kind of the stuff in the beginning, you know, this stuff. Lillian, obviously, this is her artwork here. And so she already kind of had the story already compiled. It was already a book that she had done called The Picture Bride, and something she had self-published. So not a lot of people actually probably saw it. So we're hoping this is sort of a way that we can bring the story to a wider audience, especially a younger audience. You know, the whole idea of this book is to inspire the next generation to want to learn more about history. And so that's sort of even how we end the book, right? Is that the kids are actually, I shouldn't give away the ending, but, you know, the kids end up in the library, right? And they're actually reading, you know, books about the subjects. And also, you know, Emma, who's the main character, really sort of develops a greater appreciation for her Japanese Canadian sort of side of the family, considering that she self-identifies as being a quarter, right? And I think as Japanese Canadians, we're always self-identifying in that fractioned way, which is something that I always tell kids to be careful of. You know, don't break yourself down like that. I think it can be harmful. I used to always say I'm half Japanese. I would always say that to people, and I started to realize that was probably not the best way to be self-identifying. You know, you're not half of anything really. You know, I think the idea is that it can be part of, and I think especially as we move forward with our Nikkei sort of identity in North America, we're going to become a lot more fractioned in that way. So you know, if we continue to kind of identify as whole, I think we're going to be in a good place. And I think this is what we're trying to sort of use as the moral of the story, is that you might identify as being mixed, but don't ever let anyone take away, you know, your sense of Japanese Canadian or Japanese American identity. And I think that's what I really wanted to kind of focus on with this. So I think early on as a mandate for me, especially philosophy and creating artwork, is to create things that have the ability to inspire and to engage dialogue and discussion, but also to explore identity. And, you know, I think for me, as long as I continue to create more work along those lines, I'm going to be fulfilled as an artist and happy that, you know, the work that I'm doing is helping to inspire people, not just to create their own work, but to, like I said, have those discussions within themselves.
Yeah. Wow. That's awesome. I really like how you articulated that. I think it's important to not break ourselves up so much the way that we do to try and sort of fit with whoever's around us, but to really take more of the time to understand our own identities in that way.
Yeah. You're even TADAIMA too, right? You know, a lot of the organizers, you know, are mixed Japanese American. You know, so I think when we're seeing that Yonsei and that Gosei generation, you know, we are becoming more blended and mixed. And I think there is an inherent worry within sort of the older community that, you know, what's going to happen, you know, or is it sort of going to fade away? But I think what's great about that is that it's not, you know, as we're seeing that now, you know, with these sort of things like TADAIMA and a lot of the other sort of groups that are continuing on, even Powell Street and such, that we're getting a lot more mixed people involved. And I think they are starting to self-identify, you know, as saying this is a Japanese Canadian Nikkei identity now. And this is how it's going to be. And that's going to be okay. You know, we're going to be all right, as long as we are continuing to have these discussions and presentations and creating media that celebrates this.
Right. Yeah, that's so great. And Jeff, if you have a little bit more time, we have a couple more questions. Is it fine for me to? Okay, great. So Ken Mochizuki asks, have you ever considered a book on the Hapa struggle for his or her own identity, as opposed to the characters just happening to be Hapa?
Yes, and this is exactly what On Being Yukiko is. It was really important. We actually have a section in the middle of the book where Emma, who is actually talking to her friends, sorry, I'm trying to pull that up now, you know, this section here, but they're actually having that discussion. You know, her friend is mixed Nigerian, and her other friend is sort of a mix of European things. They're all having this sort of discussion around their sense of identity and being mixed, and, you know, realizing that they had never talked about that before. And I think that's really important that, you know, especially this generation, there's a lot more mixed kids, and that these dialogue and this sort of like self-reflection is happening amongst them, because they can help each other. They can have those conversations. They can feel more comfortable that other people are experiencing the same sort of thing that they are. Because as a kid, you know, sure, I had my sisters and my cousins who were all mixed too, but we never talked about it. We never talked about it once. We are always aware of it, but we never had those conversations. And it wasn't something I could talk to my parents about because they could never understand, right? And it wasn't until I made One Big Hapa Family where we had that discussion for the first time, and I'm in my 30s. Right. So, it's eye-opening, I think, sometimes to have those discussions, but I think it's also important to have those support factors within your own friend circles. So yeah, definitely. I think that's what's important too, is that a lot of the focus that those stories of Hapa-ness, like What Are You Anyways, on my experiences made sense because I lived those experiences. I had a hard time, creating, other stories about that for other people if it weren't my own lived experience. So I think with Emma in the book, because she's 12 and she's sort of going through this very pivotal point in her life of thinking, the whole first page starts off saying, like, who am I? Right. And she's thinking about the fact that she has a Japanese name, Yukiko, but, only her grandma calls her that. Right. And so that sort of builds that conversation. And I guess that's what I mean. I want to create that dialogue. And I think that's what's great is that you have this dialogue between the grandmother and the granddaughter. And then we're going into the history of it all too. And so that whole thing compounds and we get this really rich experience that can be told through this type of a story. And really, I want it to parallel real life. You know what I mean? Like, the stories that you're having with your grandparents, the stories I'm having with mine. And the fact that we can share those stories together. The end of the book is that Emma wants to share the story with her whole class, right? And I think that's what's important is that, this untold story that she never knew about her grandparents' internment and being sent back to Japan after the war, or her great-great-grandparents. There was a lot of just terrible things after another, that happened, and they endured, right? But it was a great hardship and a great expense. And that's what we're trying to show is that, that this history is so important to know so we can appreciate, what we have now and how we're moving forward.
Right. Wow. Yeah. I can't wait to pick up a copy or to pre-order my copy down the line. That seems like the perfect end to what we've been trying to talk about with TADAIMA and share and all of that. Okay. Well, one last question before we let you go. Do you ever envision yourself opening your own animation studio or perhaps teaching your animation style to others?
Well, little known fact, I actually have a degree in education, secondary arts education. So I taught high school animation for a little bit. I taught 4 years of college level animation. So I have taught animation in the past. I still do tons of workshops. Probably I'll do a dozen animation workshops in a year to youth. I'm maybe expanding more to doing online stuff now because of the pandemic. But technically with Meditating Bunny, we operate as kind of an animation studio. So it's not so much a big space, but more of a satellite. So I operate it kind of out of my sort of office space, and I have friends of mine who I hire out to do animation. So work collaboratively with me, right? So I do probably about 50% industry animation, so commercial animation. So I'll have clients that will do commercial work for like big companies like 3M or Sharpie. I've been doing a lot of stuff with like libraries in the US lately. But on the side, 50%, I'm doing the passion project work. Obviously, there's not a ton of money in the independent work. So I have to sort of offset that with the commercial stuff, which is why, things like the On Being Yukiko is really important that we're doing this pre-order so that we can kind of raise enough capital to print the book, because we are doing it independently. And if we did it through a publisher, it'd be like 4 or 5 years from now, the book will come out. We want the book out now. We want it to be in the hands of people. We also want to be able to have creative control on this project because we know how important that is. And for me, that's always been a motivating factor in anything I do is to have full creative control on a project. So that's why everything I do through the studio is usually independent based. So that's why we really rely heavily on, word of mouth, people, following us.
Oh, Jeff, we lost your mic for a second. I think you accidentally muted yourself.
I already muted myself. Oh yeah, sorry.
Say it again. That's okay.
I don't do enough self-promotion. So follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Meditating Bunny. And that's the best way to kind of follow us because really, like I said, if you didn't pick up on that because the mic dropped, a lot of the stuff we do is independent, right? And it's so important to us to have that creative control on these projects. So, but when you're doing things independently, we have to rely heavily on sales or trying to get grants or people to help fund us. If there are organizations or associations that want to come on board to help with the On Being Yukiko sponsorship, we actually are doing a lot of sponsorship packages with Japanese Canadian associations.
Cool.
So they can come on board, and in exchange, we give you copies of the book. We're going to do a presentation for these organizations with Aline and I, as well as you'll get a little logo on the back of the book. So if they want, contact me. You can get in touch with me through the website, meditatingbunny.com. Just reach out and I can send you that information. So yeah, if there's somebody on these organizations that think that this might be a great opportunity for them to get on board with these initiatives, we'd love to have that support. But again, yeah, this is so great with what TADAIMA is doing, and the fact that we're able to reach out to international community, especially with this kind of stuff. So I want to thank you guys for having me be a part of this.
Oh, thank you so much. And I mean, Jeff, through you, we were able to be in contact with so many other folks in Canada and bring their programming in. So thank you so much. Thank you for taking the time to do this workshop with us and answering our questions. This has been great. It's been fun.
Well, thanks, Erin.
Yeah.
And if anyone has further questions that weren't answered or they just didn't feel they were a little shy to ask, like I said, best way to reach out to me is through my website or just info@meditatingbunny.com. Send me an email or find me on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter. And I'd be more than happy to, guide people in the right direction if they have questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jeff. And to those of you watching, tune into the book club and fine arts session tonight. Thank you so much, Jeff. Take care.
Thanks, Erin.